Hi, my name is Rico Figliolini. This is my podcast. Every month I do with City Manager Brian Johnson, who comes on a Thursday lunchtime. It's called Prime Lunchtime with the City Manager. And we do this once a month right after the City Council meeting on Tuesday. This way we get the best of both worlds, being able to see what's happening and what's coming forward. And I appreciate you joining me again, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is good. So if you have questions, if you feel that you want to post anything online, feel free to. If you're watching the show on Facebook Live, you can do that. So if you're not and you're listening to the podcast and you'd like to watch this live, you should join and like our page. Just find Peachtree Corners Live on the Facebook and on Facebook, and you can get notifications when we do go live and post your questions. So here we are. We're entering. This is the tail end of the summer almost, the last few days.
Well, but it doesn't feel like summer. I mean, my kids are back in school, so it's kind of really, to the normal grind and the days of summer and vacation and pool, openings and swim competitions are over.
Yeah, it's amazing. My northern friends, they start school after Labor Day. Of course, our kids have been in school for weeks now.
That's how I used to be. Growing up is usually the first Monday after, or the Tuesday after Labor Day is when we started, but not here.
Yeah, it's interesting. But at least the kids get off May 24th at the end of May as opposed to the end of June, right, in beginning of that summer. So we come together every month to talk about city issues, topics, things going on. There's always something that we learn from Brian and from the city that is happening. And we just, actually talk about other things that may not be newsy, but may just be things that we're just picking up on topics and finding out where we are a month later, if there's any progress on certain things. So, because things do change, right?
Very frequently, yes.
Yeah. So we have that Flippin' Trail debacle that happened, that unfortunate falling, the road just fell away. Where is that at right now?
Yeah, so we have a location in which we've got an existing stream that, over the years, the developments happened in the city along this particular watershed and stream. It's become a very important drainage feature for, stormwater runoff for developed parcels, and including neighborhoods. And in this case, it was in the Peachtree Station neighborhood. Yeah. But so this particular stream had some corrugated metal pipes that went underneath, or allowed this stream to go underneath Flippin' Trail. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about this before in the civil engineering profession's infinite wisdom. Number of decades ago, they thought corrugated metal would be a good material to use for drainage. Yes. Little did they know that over time they corrode and rust, and then they fail. And so this was an example where the corrugated metal pipes failed. Mm-hmm. And then you started to have water get outside of the pipe and start eroding on the outside of the pipe. And they ultimately, over time, that erosion, maybe just a little bit, and it becomes bigger and bigger and starts eroding other things, and it eroded underneath the road and the masonry that was holding up the bank, and ultimately created really a sinkhole scenario, and the entire road caved in. Of course, we had already blocked it off by the time that happened. But so we had to replace the entire road. So we had to remove the entire section of road and replace those pipes. This time it's with poured, concrete pipes. Mm-hmm. It's increasing the capacity. There used to be 2 pipes of around, I think, high 70, 80-inch pipes. We're actually adding 3, one 96-inch pipe in the middle and 2 84-inch pipes on each side. Okay. So there's more capacity so that if upstream flow has got to, greater volume, it will be able to get underneath the road and continue downstream.
Because that was probably built when Peachtree Station.
It was placed in when Peachtree Station was created, that subdivision.
There wasn't a lot of development necessarily in the area, so there's more runoff, right?
Right. Yeah. There is, and it's interesting and challenging if you look at a map of the city, a topographical map of the city, and how the stormwater in the city is all designed, or should be designed, to flow like anywhere into a natural body of water for it to be carried wherever God initially had it. In this case, in our city, it's the Chattahoochee River.
Right.
So basically, most of the drainage is been designed to ultimately get into the Chattahoochee River. Now, in some cases, depending on where in the city you are, it oftentimes will flip or it will cross multiple watersheds. And those are kind of more smaller areas within the city that are kind of like, they all share kind of the same characteristic of flow. It's all angled a certain way, and sometimes they share detention, whatever. But anyway, you get on a map, and we have functions where you can drop put a drop of water on a map, and it'll flow that drop of water all the way down until it gets into
where it's going. Okay.
And you just be surprised at how many neighborhoods are affected by upstream development. I mean, you could be living in, Amberfield and be affected by development that's out off of PIB.
Yeah.
Because it's flowing back towards the Chattahoochee through their area, and oftentimes it's into watershed, and then that watershed feeds into another watershed, and then I
got to believe the big pipes that you put in, that's going to feed that. I mean, you didn't take it all the way to the river, so there's pipes along the way, areas along the way that'll be affected by that too eventually.
It's like dominoes when you do anything in drainage. It's such an intricate balance that anytime you make a change, there is going to be areas of upstream and or downstream that are affected. So you got to be very careful. You could find a choke point somewhere that currently might be creating upstream flooding in certain cases because it's a choke point and water can't get through. And then if you just, without considering downstream effects, you're like, oh, well, we'll widen that choke point. But then if you do and you're not careful and the engineers, and hydrologists don't get involved, you could create a downstream problem because now you're letting water get downstream of that choke point.
That's right.
And a higher velocity or volume. And now downstream could have some sort of a erosion issue or flooding issue. So every time you do something, you've got to consider the impacts it has both upstream and downstream. And so it's a really delicate, difficult balance.
So is that road finished now?
It is not. It is. It's going to take a few more months. No. Just a couple more weeks.
Oh, okay.
Pipes are in. They're backfilling it. Right now. And so there's kind of two phases. The main one is to get the road open as quick as possible. Right. So we will open the road before the landscaping is done because we want the road to open quick. And then we'll so if anybody sees it and thinks that's the final product when they open it, no, we'll be opening the road before we end up putting in whatever landscaping we do on each side.
Right.
But so we will do that, but we can open the road immediately. We're only weeks away from being open.
Oh, great. Good.
We jumped on that.
Yeah. No, I know. And you guys were ready to do it because you already had the bid out, not even knowing what was going to be happening. So that was great.
We have an on-call bid that we do for companies to be on call for emergency repairs. And we knew that this was potentially going to need some work even before the failure happened. So we had actually got the design updated from what Gwinnett County had initially started with a number of years ago. So when this happened, we basically had the updated design done and the on-call contract. So we were put in a locate for the utility companies to cut off their connections. I mean, 2 days after it happened, we were ready to get started. Now, it took a while. Water and sewer had to be capped. and separated, and then gas and telecommunication were all across this. They had to cut it and cap it on each side temporarily. So that took a while for us to be able to finally get in there because of that. But we were ready, and it just, we're a smaller entity. Cities, oftentimes because they're smaller in area and smaller in citizenry, can be more responsive than in bigger, county government oftentimes. And so it's a evidence that us assuming responsibility for drainage within the city from Gwinnett County was a wise decision because we can be more responsive than Gwinnett County can, just because we're smaller. And it's not even the fact that it's less layer. It's just the fact that the county's big, and to respond to something like this could have taken way longer. There was, so we were talking at one point, there's a question out there right now. About the Peachtree Corners Circle, about the roundabout. Okay. I guess. And where status? Is that? The question was status? I think one of them is that, and there's a few other questions that are popping in, so we'll just take them great. All right, so the Peachtree Corners Circle, so that is currently in the final phase of acquisition. Design's done, money's been appropriated, contractors on board. Okay. Ready to start. So everything's been... Everything except one last thing, and that is there were a couple places that we have to acquire property. Okay. And we, on two separate occasions, tweaked the design to decrease the amount of property we needed to acquire as part of this. But ultimately could not get to an agreement with two of the 5 landowners that we needed to acquire property from. And so we ended up having to go into the legal system. Condemnation to be able to do that. I mean, you're talking about appraisals in the, less than 50,000, and they're wanting hundreds of thousands. Sure. So the separation, we couldn't, And you're not buying all their property. You just needed a portion. Oh, no, just a little bit of portion. And, we just were so far apart. We knew it wasn't about, quibbling over a little bit. We were initially prepared to pay, 125% of appraised value. I mean, so somebody feels like, they didn't just get the bare minimum. Yeah, how long will that take? Oh, that's been in the works for, about 2 months now? Yeah. So probably another month, and we'll be ready to go. All right, cool. And then construction will start, and, it'll be phased in. When I say phase, I mean, it'll be done at once, but it'll be done in a way that there's traffic will continue to be able to traverse the area. Okay, the whole so it's not completely We're not closing any of those roads now. Excellent. So there's another question out there about someone wants to know the cost that the city's downtown development authority had to purchase a property. I don't think it's this property, obviously. Number R6301. It's located on Peachtree Corners Circle across from Orange Theory Fitness. Oh, that probably was the Chile property. That was, they're noting it as a 0.15 acre lot running alongside. 0.15? Yeah, and I'm not sure what that is. I don't think that's related to that. Well, right across Peachtree Corners Circle from that Orange Fitness or whatever would be the property that Charlie Roberts owns. That's going to be where the Hotel Indigo and the apartments are going to be going. Right. So across the street now. And then if you follow Peachtree Corners Circle around and you get to the detention pond on the right where, what is it, Da Vinci Court, that area? Yeah. Right across the street from that on the left where there's still the big grove of trees is the parcel that the city purchased. Yeah, and that's bigger. Isn't that about 6 acres? Yes, correct. Now, if it's 0.15, I have heard that at some point in the past, as there have been multiple owners involved in whatever, that there was a spite strip that somebody owned out there along Peachtree Corners Circle. You know what a spite strip is? No. So it's spite strip, as in SPITE, like you're spiting somebody. Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Yeah. Spite strip is a real estate acquisition technique where a developer or somebody that's dabbling in that or wants to control something will purchase some sort of a controlling interest, whether it's fee simple title ownership or an easement interest along a roadway, just a narrow of enough strip that you can't really do anything with it. You can't develop it.
Right.
But you own it so that if I owned a little strip along a road, let's say the road was to my right, and I own a little strip, and then you have a parcel, a big developable parcel, in between on the other side of me, I have a little strip between you and the road. And if you want to develop your property, you've got to get access to that road.
How would that even be out there like that?
Well, people sell those things all the time. So let's say you had before you bought that parcel you want to develop. The guy who had bought it before you was approached by somebody who's like, "Hey, I want to purchase just easement rights to a narrow strip along the roadway of your property." And you're like, at the time, you're like, okay, sure. So you do. And then you sell your property one day or whatever, or that other person, and you buy it. And now you want to come in and develop it. And you go to the city and you're like, hey, I want a curb cut. I want an encroachment permit. I want to create a driveway off of your road into my development. And then the city looks at the plat and they're like, well, you got to get permission from the guy who owns the easement on that strip. And then I do, and then you come to me and I'm like, sure. And then I ask for some exorbitant amount of money. Or I never want you to develop that, so I never give you permission. And I can lock you down because you can never get access to your parcel.
What a great name for that piece of property. But the city hasn't purchased that.
No. We're not involved in that. But I'm just saying the only thing that I can think of as far as a 0.15 acre parcel in that area was what I heard a couple years ago is there were definitely something's going on within private land developers
so someone may
out
own
there
that little strip, but it's not the city.
Right. Now, the DDA, and the only other thing I could potentially think of is Charlie Roberts, as part of his development and rezoning, he deeded, I think it was 0.9 acres to the city up along Peachtree Corners Circle. It's actually where part of the property, when the detention pond by Da Vinci Court, where it drains underneath Peachtree Corners Circle, that area, when the outlet comes in on the town center side of Peachtree Corners Circle, it's heavily wooded, it's pretty steep down there, and it's where the creek runs. He deeded the city 0.9 acres there for us to have. That might be, now of course when he deeded it to us, the city transferred it to the DDA because that's who we end up having owning our real estate. So that might be the other thing.
Okay.
And that will ultimately be an undisturbed, passive type of thing, because a lot of it can't be done anyway because you've got this drainage structure in a creek. There may be some passive amenity that's placed in there, maybe a path or something, but it's never going to be developed. It really can't. It's pretty difficult. That may be it. Other than that, I mean, the only people that own property out there, now within the golden triangle, so to speak, of the town center, which is 141, Medlock, and Peachtree Corner Circle, are us.
Right.
As far as undeveloped, the city through its DDA or Charlie Roberts.
Right.
Everything else.
Because the Cheney property, obviously, someone had mentioned. So, So the city owns that, and that's going to wait to see how it's going to be developed until later. Yeah.
Well, so council, what they want to do on that one is nothing until we get the town center open, and the town green especially open, programmed, and events are happening. And then they're going to assess. They're going to watch how it's activated. Once we activate the town green and we have events, then they're going to see what may be a value add to the town center.
Sure.
It could be...
Because that right abuts the town center.
It does. It's
so
right between the town green and and Peachtree Corner Circle. That wooded... So... There's many of options. I mean, things talked about like expanding the town green if we needed more town green space.
And the amphitheater part or the stage part, if you were to expand, I'm just thinking out loud, if you were to expand into that area, will that be situated in a way that would make sense to expand the park that everyone... Or is that just...
well, the expansion, so the stage is going to be basically with the Cinebistro as the backdrop. the movie theater. And so you'd be looking directly towards Medlock, or almost directly towards Bush Road, and that's how the stage would be looking directly that way.
Okay, so
expansion of the town green would be as you look that way from the stage to the right.
Okay.
So you could do it still. It's just that there would be a little bit more property to the right of the stage.
So so eventually, if there was a festival or stuff, that could expand into that.
Absolutely,
part of
that's
it.
One of the uses that's been talked about. There's been talking about, a more formalized amphitheater with seating there. There's been talk about performing arts, small performing arts
center
there's
been
nice. Talked about, but council, has been wise to say, look, let's get what we already are committed to. Let's get it activated.
Okay.
Let's look at it. Let's watch it, how it's being used, and then once we do that for a while, we'll know what the best value add to that town green's activities are. And we don't know that yet because it hasn't been activated.
All right, cool. So let's see. So, there's another question out there. Someone's just about to sign a lease, I guess it looks like, at Echo Development, or they're wondering if Echo Development is indicative of the type of projects that Peachtree Corners Circle will be green lighting in the future. Is that something?
Well, okay, Echo Lakeside. So that is the apartment.
Used to be the Twin Lake, it was called at one point?
Correct.
Okay.
Its entrance is into Tech Park off of PIB near Reps Miller Road.
Right.
Or really off Reps Miller Road. You get on Rep Miller Road off of PIB, and then you kind of... Anyway... So, that's a couple hundred units that we believe the way it's been developed, it'll probably be popular with millennials.
Okay.
And it's got connectivity to the town center through the multi-use trail.
Right.
And so if you live there and you work in Tech Park, you could walk and not take your car at all, which would be pretty cool. But... to answer that question, I'm not sure if there's a specific thing, like is that indicative of the density or the architectural aesthetics or apartment versus townhome or what? I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah, and I think some of it has to deal with the way maybe the construction companies work in it or the landscaping, because it's not complete.
No, it is not.
It's still in the midst of being done.
In fact, if you see it from PIB, that's the most unfinished part is up by PIB. They started down by the lake and got the pool and their section of the multi-use trail and the I don't know if you want to call it the property manager's building, that, and they work back towards PIB. So PIB is the last
part
that at front. So it definitely looks more unfinished off PIB than if you drive down Rep Miller towards their clubhouse and pool. That's much closer to being done.
It's like, when you got to wait until it's completely finished to be able to see what it looks like. And there's an opinion about everything, whether it's being overbuilt or not, whether the right amount of units are being done there. Of course, some people live there now and they think it's really good. So,
again, hopefully at the end of that project, there's not any concern. But, that development was in keeping with the Innovation Hub Master Plan for Tech Park. One of the things that came out of that study was for us to kind of activate the inner core of Tech Park by doing a couple things. One was do more mixed use, allow more of a mix of use, especially including allowing some housing units within Tech Park, because again, that offers the ability to work right, live right where you work.
Right.
Connectivity within Tech Park, multi-use trail, that was another important one. People to be able to walk around, whether it's just for exercise, live here or between buildings. Enhance the communication, the level of communication options within here as far as fiber and, wireless connectivity.
Sure.
But this housing and the diversity of housing, which is important and came out of that plan, was also to make sure that we had not just housing options in Peachtree Corners for the family or that was at a point in time where they want to detached residential house, and they've got the white picket fence and the 2.5 kids, which we have a good housing stock there. We want townhomes for those who want to own but not have all of the burden of mowing the lawns or whatever. But then we also have a need for apartments. I mean, you got to be careful where they go, what they look like. But, because there are some people who don't want to own, or they're not in a career that they want to be that tied into something.
Right, they want to be a little bit more transit to be able to move
and flexible. And so that's a good example of us being able to diversify our housing stock at a location that helps out Tech Park. So
no, I like the part that about you have to be careful where you put it, because right now, I mean, I think it's almost 50% apartments
citywide.
So it's a large percentage.
Yeah, it's getting close to that.
It's a large percentage.
Yes. Now, most of them are down, in a certain area of the city. We don't have much in the north.
And they're older stock also. I mean, they're over 20 years old, some of these places. They may have been revamped recently, some of them, and they're actually maxed out, some of them. There's no vacancy, so it's kind of neat to be able to see that. So as far as, and there's, I was looking at demographics. There's actually, I think the city average is almost like a 34.6 or median age of 30.6 years old.
Which is younger than most people would think.
Yeah, because I thought it was a little older, but that makes sense with apartments also, because younger people, I think, on there less younger than homeowners would be, so that almost makes sense.
We're at that point in life where you're now an independent adult,
right?
Maybe even married, maybe even with kids, but you're earlier in your independent career.
Yeah.
And so you're not either able, you don't have the equity yet, or you're not making enough to necessarily buy something, or you're just like, look, I don't want that much responsibility yet, I'm still, so it's important to have diversity in housing stock, and not have too many eggs in one basket. It doesn't mean you have to have an equal percentage, but you should have offerings across the spectrum of housing, or else you're going to run into problems of not being able to, if you have a big service sector and you have nobody that can live near where it's hard to find.
That's a big problem in a lot of cities. I know California and San Francisco, especially San Francisco, has that problem. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Mike, for your questions. Hopefully we answered some of that. Let's go back to a little bit of what's going on with the city as far as the town green and hiring staff. Or did you guys come up with town green manager? Did you end up hiring someone, or did you find someone?
Okay, so we've got the town green. That's going to, we're starting construction of that next week. And when it's done, you've got all these amenities. You got this big open space. You're going to have a stage. You're going to have a big, television screen. So you got these opportunities to do lots of events. So we know that. We want that. It's, what quality of life factor that we know that we can improve and provide for our residents. But to do it right, you've got to have somebody who's kind of concentrating on that. So we had two options when we knew that we wanted to commit to making sure that there was organized stuff going on a regular basis, which, by the way, is extremely common. Suwannee's town green, which is probably the most well-known around here as far as one that's used a lot, that doesn't happen just by chance. It happens by things ideas getting thrown out there, organized, advertised, disseminated, encouraged, and then it becomes these things that every year you do. And so we want to do that. Well, there's one or two ways to do it. You could either hire somebody full-time to do it, or you could hire the service to do it. And so even though most cities hire an individual or individuals, as the case may be, last city I was at, we had a couple individuals whose sole purpose was to program, organize, manage, market events on public, a public space like that. But we went the route of initially wanting that service to be provided by a third-party event planning firm than for us to hire somebody initially.
Okay.
The reason we did that is, A, we don't know, because it hasn't started yet, quite, all of the details. We don't know. We're starting some of these things from scratch. There's not it's not the 10th annual. It's not like Light Up the Corners, but it's been happening a long time or whatever. So, A, we want to have some help in creating some of these ideas, being introduced to certain people, groups, entertainment acts, or whatever.
And I'm excited because it seems like one of them, is this the one? I was looking at the minutes of the summary, not to interrupt, but it's Premier Events, and I'm familiar with them a little bit from the newspaper I work at because they do other events throughout the city.
That's correct.
They've done...
Throughout Metro Atlanta.
Metro Atlanta, correct. I mean, they did Music Midtown, Chastain Park, Atlanta Dogwood Festival, concessions management at least, the High Museum Atlanta Wine Auction, Taste of Alpharetta. They've light the Night Walk. I mean, reasonably good events,
that is the
actually.
firm that we are... that was awarded the bid.
That is the firm,
yes,
okay.
So they're the ones that are going to provide the service. So instead of us hiring somebody and then that's all they're doing, and you run into a couple things. One, if it's just one person only has so many connections and so much experience.
Sure.
Two, I'm not sure that it's a full-time gig yet. I'm not sure if I even want to have it in-house. And so I thought, you know what, let me recommend to council, and they agree that let's bid out a service. And so we bid out the event management service that is part of this. And of course, that comes with a couple things. One, they're there to help recruit unique activities there. So they've got connections with all of these things. They got many people in the firm. So we're not getting an individual. We're getting, depending on the event, multiple people. Okay. To go out there and come up with ideas, or if we have a particular goal is to go out and try to, lock that entertainment act down, whatever it is, then to organize all the stuff. Who's going to do what? Do we need police officers? No. Do we need this?
Porta
do all of that. Porta potties. Do all the logistics.
Right.
And then provide the manpower necessary to set up and break down the town green when these events happen.
Sure.
And so we're getting the service, not the individual. So that means that, there are some days that they won't be doing anything for us because it's not necessarily an everyday full-time job.
Correct.
But sometimes we'll need,
So will they? I remember when I had the sports magazine, we did an event. We actually rented out Sewanee Park Town Center, and we did an event there. We had maybe 100 vendors. It was a Saturday event. It was a tough event to put on. I mean, it took us a long time, a few months to get it together, put it together. Sewanee was great to work with. We did it. I think it turned out really well. So if someone wanted to bring an event to the town green, will they work with? Will that be allowed? Will Premier Event work with that company or individual to bring an event to the town green? How would that work?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, anybody who wants to do it, it's the cities. So the city is still, the entity that you would go to say, hey, I've got an event idea, right? Or and I'd like either I need your help, or I can do it all on my own. I just need permission, type of thing. Right. But still, the city, our third party, event, managing service is just to do it on our behalf. So it's still us. It's not. They don't give permission. They do. They work for us.
So who'd be the point of contact here in the city for that?
I don't know who I'm going to associate. I mean, I do know that as far as a department head, my community development director will be the department head that I hold responsible for doing this. Diana Wheeler does, she has been informed that has been dropped on her plate.
One more thing to do.
Right, but she's really good at that. So I don't know which one of her staff she's going to potentially tap as the initial point of contact. Okay. That's really her decision.
Sure. And it's going to develop anyway.
It will. We'll have guidelines and all that kind of stuff. But, one other important point to that, and that is there's going to be, I guess, 3 types of, if you want to call it events, happening on the town green. There's the one type of event where you think of that requires lots of support, like a concert, where you've got lights and audio requirements and security and, maybe beer garden and, just all that stuff, parking and major events that require a lot of logistics and support and everything. And we'll have those, and that'll be great. Then there'll be the other end of the spectrum, which is the green is just used oftentimes by groups, but in an ad hoc, somewhat organic manner. Okay. Hey, you want to go out, us 5 go out, meet out and throw the Frisbee around, or the family goes out and puts out a blanket, and, whatever. So you just have things going on, but it's not necessarily needing true organization. You're just out there using the amenities. Right. And then there's the in-between, and that is there could be some events. In fact, we hope that there's events that are organized, but they don't require any third-party support.
So maybe it's a corporation that would like to do an event for their employees, 100, 200 employees on the town green, and they could essentially rent the town green and be able to
Correct.
To do that.
Depending on what, it may even be to a small enough, like, for instance, we've had some interest in doing yoga on the green in the mornings, and so there could be some individual who says, look, I'm going to do yoga town green in an organized manner, meaning I'm going to have a group of individuals that I communicate in, like by email or whatever, telling them what time and inviting people. And then I go and I want to set up my little mat. Right. And then whoever wants to come out there and do it with me,
you need to be able to have the ability to reserve that space. Right, but
it's correct. And you're just like, look, I just want to do it. But then the city's like, great, that's awesome, you've got it. And so they go out there, but it doesn't require the event management or the city to have police out there or to turn lights on.
But the ability for a yoga place to say, I want to do this, and I want to make sure I have that space so when we show up, we have this space. So
so there will be it's almost similar now that if you want to reserve space in our in City Hall, community chess is what we're calling it. It's the the multi-purpose room that you can have meetings.
Yeah. That's the one with the kitchen even, I think, right?
Correct. There's a catering kitchen that can be used if you want to do it. Rotary is now they're using that as their consistent space, and so you can do that. You'll be able to do the same thing at Town Green if you want to use it. We just want to make sure that we don't double book or people two groups show up at the same time and like, wait a second. So some of it won't cost, some of it might if it requires some support. We'll see, but the process and the criteria are currently being developed now so that when it activated, we'll be ready.
What if someone wanted to, you may not have an answer for this yet, but someone had asked me about it or they were talking about it. What if you want to do an event there and charge for that event? Let's say, like you have Shaky Knees in the city. That's a long, full-day concert, multiple stages, obviously, in that particular case. But let's say you want to do something like that and you want to charge for admission.
Gate, right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how that would happen in the town green, the function the way that is, but...
Well, you can do it. I mean, last city I was at, we had a number of types. You would have free to the public events. For those to happen, you oftentimes have to have the city is generally, or sometimes it's authority or, so it is eating some cost. Right. Which is fine. I mean, again, it's for the general public. So, but you have them where it's free to the public. You have some that you charge, but when you do charge, the entertainment that you're charging to come see or participate with will almost without exception say, fine, but we want a percentage of gate proceeds.
Makes sense.
Yeah, because they're like, look, you wouldn't be able to charge for people to enter here if it wasn't for us doing our thing. Right. Yeah. So if you don't charge, then, let's say you were a musician. And if you have a particular dollar amount you charge for your concert. If we didn't charge the public, you would say, all right, for me to come out, it's going to be X dollars. Writes you a check, you get it, you perform, good. If we charge gate proceeds, you would say, fine, my appearance fee is X dollars like it was before, and percentage
Admission.
Y of the gate proceeds. And so you tend to share it, some more than others, depending on the act. And then the third one is we just turn it over to a private entity. So they come out and they rent the space, which would be the dollar amount would depend on how much support they may or may not need.
Or whatever it is. Okay.
And then we say you are free to make this I guess call it an exclusive event because it wouldn't be open to anybody unless you paid.
Correct. So
and then they would get to keep whatever after we got our dollar amount. They get to keep whatever they make, or lose whatever they make.
Correct,
too.
because it's an investment, right? So, like Sewanee, when they do the wine fest, I think, or the beer fest, they do there. I mean, those things have to be charged because eventually, that you're getting the wine or beer because of the tickets, let's say.
Correct. And vendors like food carts and other things that come out, oftentimes what you do is you rent the space. So if you were wanting to bring out your hot dog stand and sell to people at the event, we charge a certain dollar amount for you to rent this stall. And once we get it, that's all you owe us.
Right.
And then you go out there, and then however much money you make or lose is on you. But
it is the business, right? So anyone out there that hears this, the Town Green is a place that can, for some people, they can be entrepreneurial, come up with a great event idea that can work on that space, and the city would provide support, obviously for a fee, to cover the, everything else, the infrastructure part of that support. So that's
and there may even be instances where there may not even be a fee. It's just I need to reserve it because it doesn't require anything other than
yoga class.
It's just I just need this corner of it. Can I make sure that nobody else gets it? And it may be to where we're like, sure, we put them down. They have the rights, but it's no burden on us, so there's no fee. So, if people have ideas. We've had, again, the yoga. We've had different book clubs have thought about having reads out there. We're going to have a big, giant screen at the one end, so there'll be movies in the park.
You never know. It could be a book festival. I'm going to be heading to the Decatur Book Festival Saturday. And that's huge over there.
It is.
And there's not that many of them going on like that. It could be something like that.
Absolutely.
So what about Lazy Dog Restaurant? Its elevation plans were approved, and I just saw that online, and I'll be posting that to the website because the elevation look great. And that's a standalone building. I didn't realize that. I thought that was part of the whole thing. But tell me a little bit about Lazy Dog.
So if you're standing on 141 looking at our town center, if you're standing, in fact, at the intersection of 141 and what would be Forum Drive to the left or towards Forum and Town Center Drive towards Town Center, if you're looking towards Town Center there, to the right of Town Center as it comes in are two parcels between 141 and the parking deck. So the parking deck ultimately will not be seen from the road because there'll be two buildings in front of it.
Yeah, that's what people were asking. They're going to see the parking deck. No, there's empty space.
There's two out parcels. One of the out parcels, the developer has closed with a restaurant, unique restaurant based. I think they started in Wyoming, and they've got a number of locations on the West Coast. It's called Lazy Dog, and it's kind of a steakhouse type of food, but its unique shtick is the dog park. Right. There is an outdoor section of this restaurant, a courtyard, in which they encourage you to bring your canine.
They have a menu.
The canine there is a dog menu that you can order food, and they bring, so I guess the health department thing about feeding a dog off the table is you can't or feed directly. So they bring your dog what you ordered in a special dish or container or whatever, and give it to you, and then you can then set it on the ground for your canine to chow down while you're eating at the table.
So for those dog lovers, that's a great place to bring.
So they're going to be able to do that, and that's what kind of their theme, and so it's a pretty cool, more of a frontier feel.
Yeah, I saw that. It's a nice elevation plan. It's a great looking place. It's
the first in Georgia.
Neat.
So, we're looking forward to that. So that's one out parcel established, one more to go.
Right. And that second one is not... There's no plans.
Second one does not have any. I mean, I know the developer's working hard on it, but there's nothing that's locked down yet.
All right, cool. There was a budget approval for Prototype Prime or appropriations. Anything new going on with Prototype Prime?
Prototype Prime, has, like it's had in years past, it gets a $500,000 appropriation from the city for, operation of Prototype Prime. That's been the last couple of years. It's just the dollar amount is, even though it's adopted in the budget and it was a couple months ago, it's a dollar amount large enough that it requires its own standalone appropriation beyond just the budget, or at least out of abundance of caution. So it was the pro forma vote, it was already done in the adopted budget, but we just needed to actually... And
the company that was down here that had grown, they've taken up upstairs at this point. That's all open now, it sounds like.
There's two of them.
Two of them?
Yes, and Sighton and Rajoli have both graduated, if you will, from being an incubator in the true incubator environment, graduated, and they moved upstairs. So now Prototype Prime is 25,000 square feet of this building, both downstairs and up. And upstairs, they are renting larger space in a little bit more of the conventional office setting, not necessarily sharing it with everybody walking around their space. Right. And they are graduated to market rate for their rental too, because they've, so there's a graduation component
they've had some venture capitalism come in. They have budget for this type of stuff.
Correct. And so they've been successful enough that they've kind of graduated to the next level. And if they continue to do this, and they will ultimately, actually be successful enough to go out and go into true conventional market space out there in their own building.
Hopefully stay in Peachtree Corners.
Correct.
And
that is the main thing is look, these people oftentimes make personal life decisions based around where they work and what they know. And so clearly if a company is created, incubator companies have a much higher percentage of, if they're successful, staying in the place that they were created and relocating somewhere else.
Yeah, it makes sense, right?
Because, while they were in incubator status, they have leases or mortgages or their kids are in school, so they don't want to leave too far. And so it's part of our goal with an incubator is to say, look, if we help create these companies here and they grow up to be conventional, bigger companies, that they'll stay here. They like it. And then we've done economic development. We've added the fourth leg to the stool. Yeah. You got to maintain what you got. You got to try to help expand. You got to go out and sometimes recruit ones that don't exist, but then you can create. Yeah.
The city has done a great job with that. I feel like it's a startup city, essentially.
We got 3 of them in Tech Park now.
It's unbelievable.
An incubator, an accelerator, and, kind of co-working,
co-work space.
I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And another exciting thing that happened between our monthly meetings, I think, was the Georgia Tech coming in and announcing
that we haven't talked about that.
So Georgia Tech, so we got another 5-10 minutes here. Georgia Tech came in, they had a ribbon cutting, and they opened up a coding school. So tell us a little bit about that.
So when we did the ribbon cutting on the second floor here and announced that it's now open for use, we did so at the same time as announcing a second partnership with Georgia Tech. And the second partnership was with Georgia Tech's, I think it's called, is it continuing education or professional?
It's professional education.
Okay. Right. It's kind of like, you're not a conventional student that just graduated from high school, going to class all day. It's kind of you want to change careers or you want to better enhance your capabilities in a certain area. And Georgia Tech teaches a coding boot camp. So it is the schooling you need to become certified as a coder, to write code for companies. Yeah. And they only offer this at 2 other locations. One is their main campus, which of course is always going to have, and then one other one is in their satellite campus in Savannah. And so they're only offering it prior to this on 2 of their own campuses that they own property on. This is the 3rd location, the only 3rd place that they're doing this, and it's exciting. In a partnership with the city and our incubator. So we announced that we're having a coding boot camp. The first one will be in January, and it'll be taught upstairs. We have a classroom space upstairs in which it'll be taught out of. And so, yes, in addition to ATDC, which is our partnership for Georgia Tech to kind of help provide some, expertise and resources and mentorship for our team members here. That partnership already exists with Tech. Now we have a second partnership. So it was exciting. The president of Georgia Tech, President Peterson himself, came down, a bunch of the deans of their schools. And we also, and then we added to that by making it acknowledging the pioneers of Tech Park.
Right, Dennis Hayes.
At the same time. And so there were a couple of individuals who really made a name for themselves out of Tech Park in its initial years. I mean, where it was really, firing on all cylinders.
In the late 70s, early 80s.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so we recognized them, and talking to some of these guys who work here, I did not realize, the patent and trademark activities around color printers and color televisions originated here. First color printer was done here. Of course, the first, the Hayes modem, and Tech Park, Tech Park, Atlanta, right here. Yeah. Of course, we all know the Hayes modem was created, here, and but I did not realize that the jump from the black and white monochrome printers and televisions to color, that jump. And the research to get there happened here at Tech Park.
Isn't that fascinating? I mean, I never knew that. And I was just like, my God, really? There is so much going on in this city.
Yes.
That in this area that just developed out of here. It's just unbelievable. And the city
Scientific
continues.
Atlanta's work back in the day. Right. I mean, they had a really huge presence. They still have a big presence here, but, it was really big then. And, Siemens Corporation has still got a big presence here. And, they're big in research and development. So there's still some pretty exciting things going on. But, it's just pretty cool to see some of these pioneers and be like, our computers would not talk like they do to each other without the Hayes modem. I
remember that Hayes modem because I had several over the years, and to know that was from him was just really cool. From when I was a kid. We've come to the end of the hour almost. I'm going to have to let Brian go. But I want to say thank you to Prototype Prime for lending us their podcast studio for this show every month for this Prime Lunchtime with City Manager Brian Johnson. I want to thank also Explore Gwinnett because they're a partner of ours as well. And every month, Victoria Hawkins, who's with Explore Gwinnett, and I do a top 10 list. And we just released a top 10 date night list, and we'll be releasing another one in another week or two. So that's exciting for us because Explore Gwinnett is the tourist. They were known as the Tourism Bureau for Gwinnett County. Actually, they got renamed to Gwinnett County. They do a great
job, and we've got a lot of hotel rooms in Peachtree Corners who appreciate their efforts on doing a great job of. We got
dozen hotels.
We've got one location here we've got the only 2 full-service hotels for quite a ways around, which Hilton have in the Marriott, both are full-service with convention center space and restaurants and everything inside. So they do a good job.
Yeah. So this city's just growing. I mean, there's so much going on here and so many more things that will be happening with the town green. I think more people that realize what's going on here, you'll see more even conventions, small-type conventions coming to one of those hotels. Hilton actually does. It was a horror film festival at one point I saw last year. It's kind of interesting. I didn't know that.
They got whiskey? They got some whiskey convention where, that was pretty, got to go to that. I didn't go to it, but, I was like, I got to look at that. Correct.
Then. Yeah, it's amazing the stuff going on here. So I want to thank everyone for joining us here on Facebook Live and on the podcast. And I just want to give you a heads up. There'll be a couple of shows coming up, and then we'll let Brian go, and we'll close down our Facebook Live. Come back at 1:30 p.m. today, because we're going to be doing the Ed Hour with my co-host Alan Kaplan. Thanks. Alan Kaplan, who is phenomenal. He's a good host to be with. And we're going to be doing we're going to be discussing with parents forms of education, homeschoolers, charter school, private, and public. So we have, I think, 4 guests, including me and Alan, and we're going to be videotaping that a little different, a little bit more interactive on that one. There'll be also a podcast that you can get on demand afterwards, the following day, tomorrow, on iTunes and the other places. But in the coming weeks, I'm going to have Scott Hilton, who's a current assemblyman, our representative here in Peachtree Corners, and he will be running for re-election. That's coming up September 13th. Of course, at our, again, next month, we'll be planning out what we're going to be doing. Brian Johnson, again, joining me on the 27th. I'll be releasing the top 10 Explore Gwinnett lists that first week in October and the first week in September. And going into October, I'm going to have 3 candidates here for a podcast interview, and they are Democratic candidates, Beth Moore, Ben Q, and Sally Harrell. So we'll be having them here, talking to them about their candidacy, what they think where politics and government should be in the coming year, and we'll be doing that in October the 11th is the way that's scheduled for Noontime Facebook Live, so join us then as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining me, and I appreciate you coming. Stick around. We'll come back at about 1:30 for that Ed Hour. Thanks, Brian.
You're welcome.